Today we're wrenching on the Sherpa, a build that has been sitting around a little bit and is so close to being done. I got a lot of things going on right now, so I haven't been able to get to it, but I'm getting to it right now. Welcome back. We are wrenching on the Sherpa right now, and the only thing that I have left to do is a place for my electronics, the ESC and the radio, and we're gonna be good to go. So right now I'm trying to decide whether I put this ESC on the back of the motor, this is the 6-shooter, or whether I mount it right here. It's so close, it's right there. I feel like I should just mount it right there and solder it up, and then I'll have to make sure it's in the right direction. So we'll do that, and if I don't like it down the road, I'll just unsolder it and redo it, whatever. A little bit of fun never hurt anybody. So we're not using our solder sucker, solder the thing, the fan with the noise, that keeps the haze out of the room, because it's really loud, and honestly it'd be kind of annoying to have that drone on in the background. So I'm just soldering a little bit here. But if you were soldering in your house, I would recommend that you have lots of airflow. The fumes from the flux isn't a good thing to be breathing. This is lead-free solder though, so we don't have to worry about any microparticulate lead getting into the smoke, which I don't think is really a thing. I've heard of that before, but at the same time, I'd be some microparticles. That would be teeny tiny little baby Jesus particles. All right, let's see, any shrink wrap? Do I have any shrink wrap left here? I may not, however, I made this in one direction, just like the band, so we can heat shrink it from one side. I will check here just to be sure. Yeah. We're good enough. We'll do that later. I'll just solder it on. We'll make sure that this runs in the right direction. Oh, earlier, with my cameraman, we were talking about, prepping. We'll just call it prepping. Number one, what is a good way to talk about prepping without using the word prepping? You let me know in the comments if you've got, how do we describe having a reasonable amount of food stored? Because I believe most of y'all are pretty similar to me. I'm just gonna make that assumption. Y'all aren't blind to what goes on in the world. You see that, hey, we've been having some supply chain disruptions, and I talked about in my last video that one of the reasons why I got into gardening was just because I saw the possibility of food supply getting interrupted for short periods of time, and that doesn't sound fun. So let me just do some gardening, and oh, hey, it turns out that this gardening is totally fun. I don't care if I'm not producing enough food for myself. It's just fun to have, and just have a little bit of genetics and learn how plants like to be in Missouri, where I'm at right now. So that's all good and fun. But the actual thing of prepping, having enough stuff for a just in case situation, well, it has a very negative connotation these days. And I don't know if it's just because all these doom and gloom YouTube channels, let's be real about it. Everything's working just fine right now. You go to the store and yeah, maybe here and there'll be some small supply chain issues, but in the US, we have such an abundance of availability of food, and it's not a problem. But if it is a problem, I feel like this is something that we could, maybe foresee. There's some foreshadowing here. So, what is the safe amount? What is the non-weirdo amount of, let's say, food to be storing? Is a month in the pantry too much to ask? Is 3 months in the pantry too much to ask? If I'm talking to my grandparents, they would say 1 year in the pantry. This, my great-grandparents, they were born in the 1800s. They went through the Great Depression in their 40s. They they had to deal with this you know, well, their food supply. There wasn't a food supply chain like we know it today. They certainly weren't using, back in the 1800s, petroleum fuels to fly and drive food all around the world, right? So they had just a completely different scenario. So for them, 1 year storage of food was like, yeah, no duh. If we have any problems with, you know, this year's wheat harvest or whatever, well, we still got some back stores from last year. And that seems sensible to me. But these days, it seems like that's labeled as being crazy. And maybe I am. Let me know in the comments. Is this crazy for me to think, you know, 1 year of food storage? That's a lot of space too. That's honestly expensive. If your house is costing you, oh, let's see, what would it be? You know, a buck a square foot a day, or whatever it is. I don't want to do the math right now. I don't want to do the math. But if that's what we're dealing with, you know, it's not cheap to store. It's not cheap to buy, of course, but, you know, where's that line? Where is that line where having a full room full of food is considered okay? And maybe this is just a rhetorical question, that there is no line. If you're storing any sort of food in 5-gallon buckets, that you're going to be labeled a weirdo, and that's that. So to the point that has nothing to do with me wrenching on the Sherpa and is actively interfering with me focusing on this, you know, do you do any sort of food storage? We're not going to call it prepping. Nope, nope, nope. We are going to call it food storage. Yes, just in case. Maybe you love wheat. And let's say you love wheat. Do you buy uncracked wheat? Maybe wheat that's viable to also plant, so that you can have organic food or ready to plant seeds, just in case? Or do you go ahead and get it pre-milled? You know, do you get that white flour that can be saved for long periods of time? There's no right or wrong answer to this, of course. I'm just kind of wondering, what are your all's thoughts on this? Like, what's going to be appropriate for us? What can we talk about publicly online without being, you know, called a weirdo? But again, I feel like a lot of the viewers are very similar to me. They're not going to be turned off by me saying, hey, you know, I think you should probably have 3 months of food really quick. For one person, for 3 months of food, it is essentially 5-gallon buckets filled with things. And this could be, let's say, a rice, a bean, a flour or a grain of some sort, a meat, and then let's say a fruit. And of course, there's no vegetables in that, but vegetables don't store very well unless you do like a powdered vegetable, in which case, I mean, you just go 3 months out of the year without eating very many vegetables, I guess. This is what people used to do. They eat vegetables when they're in season, and when they're not in season, then they're eating the stored meats and grains in the between time. Man, times really do change, huh? And it's only been like 100 years since our petroleum revolution. I don't like calling it the Industrial Revolution, which has given us so many things. I really feel that it's more of the petroleum revolution that has happened and giving us, you know, all this access to crazy things. And now I realize that I need my sliders. And where can I steal some sliders from? I put them on one chassis, and then I must have moved the chassis somewhere. But I need my sliders. I'm gonna have to steal them. I shall steal the sliders from the other chassis when I find it. Here we go, I got some sliders. And I also have my wrenches. I am totally prepared. Like always, I'm totally prepared for this video, and you shan't tell me otherwise. This is a really old TGH transmission. This one has a Delrin 2-part case with a printed center on it. It looks printed. Yeah, that's printed. So in between, when TGH, and I may as well say Chris, because at this point in time early in the company, it was Chris doing the hard work. They went from 3D printed to actually machining in Chris's garage these Delrin parts. because as most people understand, 3D printed parts only are so good. They're not great for, things like skids. They're not great for certain parts. And one of them being transmissions. They certainly work. Don't get me wrong. They absolutely work. I certainly had TGH transmissions early on when they were all printed. However, that was something that was understood, and then we talked about that long term, if you really want your parts to hold up and to be bomb-proof against customers that, treat them like a TRX-4, then it has to be all fully machined. There's really no two ways around it. And this transmission is that really cool in-between time when Chris was machining the parts and printing some parts and then using, I think, Robinson Racing pinions on the inside to get the gear ratio that he wanted. And once they got to a point where he could afford to get custom gears cut, which is, usually that's a big number of production. I'll just say that. Not really my business to be sharing his business on numbers. But once you get to that certain threshold of going from 3D printing to machining, that's the transition of really, prototype / in the basement parts to being, real deal in a lot of ways. So the only reason why I'm saying this is it's really cool to be able to look at this transmission, see this like in between time when they were gearing up, doing enough that they really needed something more solid. Chris was able to learn how to be a machine operator really quickly, and I did help him some in that regard. Just tips and tricks. Hey, you want to use these end mills and just little stuff. Nothing that he couldn't have figured out on his own by any means, but I've got the proof right here. And maybe if one of the guys at TGH really wants this to put on the shelf, then I'll give it up. But otherwise, I'll be putting it on my shelf and displaying it proudly. Displaying it very proudly. So I'm stealing a screw from that one rig for the transmission because I lost the screws for this transfer case. Of course, I'm great about that. Oh yeah, and I mean, yeah, well, I was gonna say, look at the difference between these, but those are different products, so never mind. Never mind, didn't say that at all. And now, just need to bolt this up. Yeah. Boop and boop and boop. Oh, I can even slide this over a little bit. Ooh, look at that. Just look at that on the overhead camera, maybe. Can you see? You can see that. This transfer case really has a lot of movement to it. And that gives me enough room to where I can plop that ESC. Oh, look at that. Nice and clean right there. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. So that's what we're going to do. That's exactly what we're going to do. And in the meantime, I'm going to swap out these sliders with these relatively horribly printed ones that I made quite a while back on a printer that has very, you can hear, not good surface finish. Structurally though, that old Monoprice printer does a fantastic job, so there's really no need for me to replace them. I should, however, use the metric wrench in the metric. I should probably do that. So yeah, we don't want to strip anything out. Let's see. Are my old Losi drivers getting worn? Oh boy, yeah, that don't feel good anymore. We'll use this Vanquish one. Cool. Once I get these sliders bolted, I'm not going to have any excuse at that point on why things aren't finished. So yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to finish. Maybe not in this video, but the next video, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just go out driving it. There will be no more dilly-dallying, no more dally-dillying. Hey, that soldering iron's pretty warm. Don't know if you noticed that. I never turned it off from the last video. Boop-a-doop-a-doop. All right, how many threads do we have? That's plenty of threads. All the threads in the world. Oh, yeah. And then I guess I need a body for this. I guess. Let me know in the comments. Do you have any rigs that you just never got bodies on and you still go out wheeling it? Or are you one of those kind? Back in the day, and I mean like, 2005-ish or whatever, I was that guy in the group that would hardly ever put bodies on his rigs. I just go out crawling. I didn't care. And at the time, people would see a scale crawler and they would kind of pass it over. But if they saw one that was just like bare bones like this on the rocks, they would really take notice. Like it just caught their eyes more. And so it didn't bother me one way or another. So I just typically would not put a body on and rock it like that. But some of the scale guys, you know, they what's interesting is that these days, the guys that are still into it, at least in my town, the majority of them were back, you know, way back in the day, into it before you could even buy them. You know, you had to build your own. And now they're still into it, but all of our rigs have morphed over the years. And instead of being competition rigs, now they're all scale rigs. And some of them are scale competition rigs as well, but just really cool to kind of see the ebb and flow and to be a part of that. See all the old guys getting into it. Another side note, while we're just wrenching and talking, the local scale group, Missouri Scalers, they were out at the Capon Park, which is a pretty popular place to go crawling. Pretty awesome terrain. Y'all have seen it in some of my videos. Well, they were out there crawling, about 15 guys local, which is, for the size of our town, is a really awesome showing. And suddenly they hear more crawlers. They hear more people at the base of the hill, you know, cutting up and having a good time, and they can hear the RC cars. And so a group of them walked down, and wouldn't you know it, we evidently have two big groups of crawlers in town, and the one group had no clue about the other group. Neither of them. They didn't know each other. They'd never heard of each other. They'd never been on like the Facebook pages. Just randomly out of the blue, you have both groups in town decide to meet up at Capon at the same day, at roughly the same time, and then they run into each other. And it's just pretty incredible to me that crawling and the scale market in general has gotten that popular, that we could literally have 30 people in town and fragmented into two groups that would never have run into each other otherwise. It's really cool. I think it's cool, at least. We're gonna use a slightly longer screw on this because of the skid plate. Yeah, so that was really cool to see or hear. I wasn't there that day. I had other stuff to do, which is the worst, having things to do. Oh. Here we go, come on. We're almost done. Then I'll call it good there. So, to recap, have you ever taken so long on a project? Do you have projects that just kind of flail around for a little bit? Do you feel that storage of some food is acceptable, and how much is acceptable until you get to that, you know, this dude's crazy level of food storage. Where is that level? And another question that I don't remember what I asked now, so leave your comments below. I want to hear. Maybe y'all have the same troubles as me about sometimes having things go on forever. And part of the reason why this particular project has not been a priority for me is that we really don't do much competitions around here. And honestly, when I go to competitions, I don't go to compete. I go to hang out with people and have fun. So for me, I don't have that really high drive to get a competition rig done. I've got so many rigs. This is just fun to wrench on and to troubleshoot a little bit, and to have a place that I can set my ESC and call it home. Look at that. Look at that. That's perfect there. I could put the battery on one side or the other. Doesn't really matter. And the radio on this side. Yeah. All right. Well, really quick, I'm going to see if I can find a radio. We'll see if this goes. If I can find a radio. I don't know if I can. I need to find my bag of radios. Yep. Once again, I'm totally prepared, and I meant to not have a radio ready. So we're just going to call it there. Look at that. It's almost ready already. There is almost nothing to do, and I promise for the next video, our next week of filming, I'm gonna have this ready to go. And maybe we'll go out and check out the dead bugs in my tires. Yeah, well, I thank you for tuning in. If you do have any questions, leave them down below. Do my best to get to them, and as always, have a fantastic day.